now. Yo, what's going on, family? It's Key Marcane coming to you all the way live. Your favorite country cousin, your favorite Mississippian, and your best friend, joined by the beautiful and beautifully talented.
What's up, y'all? It's Ashley FG. You know it ain't me without the FG.
Hey.
We are back with another episode of
The Family Tree Podcast.
Boy, and is this a good one?
Spicy.
Y'all see, we done changed up the visuals. We got a couch now.
We got a couch now.
We got a couch because we got company.
Yeah.
Dr. Patricia Cruz. Let's get into it. How are you today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yes, so happy to have you. Just a little context about who Dr. Cruz is before we get into today's topic. All right, Dr. Patricia Cruz is a professor and department chair of social work and criminal justice at Belhaven University. She's been at Belhaven for 4 years. Dr. Cruz is a licensed clinical social worker, licensed in multiple states across the South. She received a Doctor of Social Work degree from Tulane University in New Orleans. She has a Master of Social Work degree from the University of South Carolina, and a Bachelor of Social Work degree from Northwestern State University. Degreed up, sis.
Degreed
And that's one thing black
All
women
social
love.
work.
Yes,
Hello.
yes. We're going to go back to school, all right? But now, I met Dr. Cruz in February.
Okay.
There was a forum about black excellence and
Okay.
leaders in the community. So honored to be a part of this forum and happy to have met her there. And so I know you have your own private practice. I want to give you the opportunity to talk about that practice. What's the name of it, where you're located, and also what do you specialize in, so our people will know where they can find those resources.
So my practice is the River Wellness. I am located in Flowood, Mississippi. And the practice has been open for a couple of years. I do have a co-therapist that works there with me. I'm principal. And my specialty is trauma. So any way you can think about it, physical, sexual, emotional, race-based. And I also do family of origin counseling, which means out here in Mississippi, they call it family curses or generational curses.
Okay.
So we unpack that and we really get to the bottom of it and find out what people are struggling with so they could disrupt cycles from generation to generation.
Okay.
That is deep, Kane.
Oh.
Dr. Cruz, where you been?
My excitement just went to a whole nother level.
You know,
snap.
Dr. Cruz, I'm curious, like, how many families do you see? Is it common for families to come in and seek help? And how often are they black families?
So it's pretty often I'm noticing now. I do see individuals, I see couples, I do marital counseling as well. And I also see families, and quite honestly, the majority of the families that I see are black families and minority families. So and then this is a different time. We're in a different space, and the person that's actually leading the family to counseling is equal. Sometimes the mother, sometimes the father.
Good to hear.
And what's also good about it too, and it's very unique for this area, is the referrals do not come from outside the family. Usually we get schools referring and agencies referring. These are families that are actually calling in saying, we need some help. We don't want to continue the cycles, whether it's anger or abuse, or we just want to try to get this right and get an expert opinion on some things to just support us.
That, for it not to be a referral is beautiful.
Absolutely.
For people to actually recognize, hey, you know what, man, we need some help.
Yeah.
So big ups to the families that's not afraid to say, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm tired of this family dynamic. I want to get better in my family, for my family. So that, and Dr. Cruz is here to help with all of that. So definitely looking forward to getting more in this conversation. Now, one thing that I want to know, why, because like Ashley said, you are degreed up, all social work. Why social work?
So, my bio had it in there, but I had previously been a nurse, so I did nursing for almost 15 years. But what I realized were people were walking in the door with problems. They were walking out the door with a little bit of help for that day, and I would see some of the same families over and over in the emergency room. And I just figured, I have to help in a different way. It bothered me also that a lot of families of color, whether they're minorities or blacks or other ethnicities, but I struggle with that a lot. And I was just thinking there has to be something to address the person in their environment. And so that's what I do as a clinical social worker. I would love for you to come and sit in front of me and we just solve one problem. But when I begin to unpack it, I'm thinking, if you have a problem, your children might have also a problem.
Trickle down.
And why did you have this problem to begin with? What is the root cause? And unfortunately, some of it didn't just happen this week or last month. It happened in childhood, for example. And people are just kind of carrying on, what they learned, what was modeled to them. So I was like, I got to go deeper. So then there was. In social work.
We're going to have to bring Dr. Cruz back a couple times,
For sure.
because you spot on. One of our more recent episodes was about the idea of generational curses. Even though we shy away from using the word curse, because it carries this connotation that we want to get away from. But the fact is, we have some issues, and it's the importance is getting to the bottom of it. And so I'm happy to hear that families are seeking help, that they are families of color, because we know that here at The Family Tree Podcast, that's what we're rooting for. You are who we are rooting for, you and your families, right? So thank you so much, Dr. Cruz, for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So today we'll be looking at the family structure. I know this whole idea started with a meme that Kane sent me, and it really blew my mind, and I started to think about, really what happened. Kane, talk to us about that meme.
Yeah, for sure. So, Dr. Cruz, I was on social media, and I came across this photo. Beautiful black family sitting at the top, right? You got the father, you have the mother. They got about maybe they had 3 or 4 kids in there.
Right.
And as well as the imagery, not just the photo itself, but they were well dressed.
They were. I noticed that.
The father was in a suit. The mother had a nice dress on. The kids were dressed to the knives, right? Below there, and that was talking about the 1950s in that era. Below there was the 2000 and 2010s era where there were more single mothers, or a single mom rather, and multiple children. And her image, she didn't have on a nice dress. She had on some more lounge-like wear. So the question is, what happened? What do you think happened, or what has studies shown have happened from the 50s, from having a full in-house family to the father being away, right, and the mother having to take care of the home front as of late?
Whew. So we probably got 2 minutes to cover about 50 years, right? So over the last, and so the image that you saw, I probably have seen some variations of that same meme. But what has happened, this is from a social scientist perspective and just really following data and trends and family structure. So over time, the family structure has changed. But also to just remember, I'm gonna talk about 50 years, but we're balancing this and comparing it to what pop culture is showing us. So they will show that family picture with the mother and the children, and the mother is dressed more casually. But what has happened over the last 50 or probably 40, 50 years or so is we have this structure, institutional discrimination and racism and government and a lot of other things, social problems that have impacted family groups, have moved men from their homes and moved them from pictures of the family structure. So what we're thinking about right now is, in that picture in the 50s, we saw black nuclear families, or nuclear families, and they had a family group. But in the 70s, due to no fault of our own, we had government intervene on our families. If a woman, particularly a woman that was on services like some kind of aid to dependent family members or something like that, if there was a man in the house that wasn't working, he had to leave, or she was going to be without her services. In the 70s, coming into the 80s, we went through an era of drugs in our urban areas that impacted our families. mass incarceration
sure.
impacted our families. So here we are, all this time later, wondering, well, what happened to our black fathers? What happened to the fathers, period? Or we do have father figures that have stood up, but that is what we're trying to wrap our arms around now, all of these years, not to mention unemployment, economics, and a lot of different social problems. The other thing is, sometimes we see those pictures of a family without the father present. It doesn't mean that he's not fathering his children. He may not be in the picture because he may have multiple children and he may be in a home with some of his children, but not all of them. So we really have to unpack that and put it in context.
That's good.
And try to work with it a little bit. I think what really matters is what's happening in our own communities and what we're seeing and feeling, and not just take that meme and make it our emotional experience and let that be everything. But let's try to unpack that a little bit. I think it is getting better. So I'll say that for now.
So with you saying it getting better, right? What have you noticed for the most part that has changed that help it to get better?
A couple of things. One, so there is some data that's tracked. The CDC tracks families and homes with fathers in the homes, and the census might not do as good of a job tracking if there is a father figure. They do track single parent households and things like that. But one thing that has changed, particularly in Mississippi, the number of families with two parents in the household has gotten better over the last 10 years. So we were at about 43% we're at about 43% now of homes with two parents in them. So we're getting better as far as that part of the family structure. The other part is we have a lot of different movements, a lot of different changes going on as far as research and being able to account for how and to what extent men are participating in their children's lives. I believe that we're doing better at deconflicting some concepts. Single parent homes, fatherlessness, which in the last 5 years has really picked up some steam. So I think we're doing better, and we're actually giving voice, and there are movements and groups that are stepping up in a father figure realm, and actually, men motivating each other to do what you're supposed to do. I think that we've had enough of, okay, they're just all in prison or just not in the home, period. And I believe that what makes it a little bit better is coming around that question. If they're not in the home, where are they? Because they might actually be in one home, but not the other.
Dr. Cruz, my dad back in the late 80s, I believe it was, had this fatherhood initiative. It was actually a national thing. So like you say, men can motivate men, right? And so, I wasn't here. I was born in the early 90s. But as he continued with that initiative, and as he even talks about it today, he too is really passionate about seeing more fathers step up. And he's aware of some of the things that you talked about that happened in the 70s and the 80s that pulled fathers out of their home. So that initiative was about teaching them. So it's not necessarily that those fathers didn't want to be in the home, but maybe they didn't know how to connect or reconnect with their children, or how to be a quote-unquote father, maybe based off of their childhood trauma, right? So a question I want to ask you, I know you see a lot of families. What are you hearing, like for fathers who do choose not to be active in, with their children? What are some of the reasons why?
Some of the reasons I hear when fathers and I'm just going to say this, the majority of them really want to participate, but perhaps they don't have tools to communicate, because the adults have to be able to communicate first. That is so important.
Spicy.
The adults need to be able to communicate. So for a father to actually participate in his child's life, he may have to go through some things. He has to communicate with the mother, and then what I'm seeing a little bit more of these days is if the mother has remarried or moved on to another relationship, that's another space that he has to learn to negotiate to get to his child.
Let's put a pin in it.
Let's put a
Okay,
pin in
okay,
that.
okay. We'll
That's
stick a
good.
pin in it.
We had a fatherhood episode, and I
Okay.
remember, my dad saying to me, I interviewed my dad for this episode, and he was just like, like women, like you don't stop a man from trying to be a father. And I'm glad that you pointed that out because let's talk about it.
Okay.
I mean, what's the issue? Why do you think that is? Why are some men having difficulties communicating with the mom to see their kids?
So,
What's your opinion about it? The issue?
Oh, please.
so what I've seen is number one, if they've finally made it to my office, they're looking for some help. They may not ask all the right questions going in. They'll say, okay, this is my problem. I want to see my child. And we have to start unpacking that too. And it comes down to a lot of things. Communication is key, but it might be, that father might have his own unprocessed trauma. The difficulties that were in the relationship that he is not in right now, but they left a bunch of unfinished business when they separated and sort of moved on in their own way. But the other part is being able to go in and see the child and have that exclusive relationship and how to package that without bringing all the rest of the emotional baggage with them. And just being able to engage with their child. A lot of fathers want to walk in and undo all the messaging that the child has, and that might not be the right approach for that moment. So we really have to talk about their childhood trauma, what they knew, what was modeled to them, all that they brought into adulthood and what they understood. So typically it winds up being, if it is in fact a father, and I want to add this really quickly. There are some single parent homes where the father is the parent in the home with the children.
Yeah,
absolutely. I've seen that, and they do very well. And so on the flip side of that, I do talk with mothers who want to see their children, and they have some of the same issues.
Interesting.
We don't talk a lot.
I don't even hear much about it.
You don't hear it, and you don't see that narrative on television,
not at all.
in film, on social media. We focus so much on
the
the mom
deadbeat dad
and the dad and the quote unquote deadbeat dad, right? And we really don't know what's happening in either household.
Facts. Sheesh. Oh my gosh, Dr. Cruz, this is amazing.
I have a follow-up question unless you're going somewhere.
No, please.
Okay, I don't want to step on your toes. So, in that instance, right? So we've talked about different scenarios where there's, a father in the household taking care of the kids, or there's a single mom taking care of the kids in the household. But where there is, and whether that's, by choice or by force, either way, in either situation, children being reared without having both parents in the household, what are the effects? What does research show? Your conversations, with the people you work with, how does that impact that child?
One is, I like the fact that you use choice or force, because that's a real dynamic that occurs when people finally, and they're unsure how to feel, what to do, and they're trying to negotiate these environments. So the playing field that needs to be leveled is the fact that it's no longer just about what socioeconomic group either family is in, because that used to be the struggle. Okay, so the child's on this side, they have this, these things that are available to them, and on this side they don't. I haven't seen that be the real big issue. The children are conflicted about how they should feel, and if they're supposed to have some sort of 50-50 emotional system, and they struggle. They struggle. I believe that they're unsure about that. Like, I feel this way about my mother or my father, but I can't express it if I'm in one setting or another, and I just don't really know what to do about it. So the kids are greatly impacted. Unfortunately, I've seen this run to its end with a child being depressed, a child running away, a child just not wanting to be involved in either scenario because they're tussling and they don't have their voice. So we don't. So sometimes they're sitting there in the middle and nobody's actually hearing what they want, even if they're at an age where they can actually decide or communicate how they feel, what they're thinking. So they also find too therapists and counselors have safe spaces. We hold space with children and we have age appropriate activities so that they can begin to express themselves. And sometimes we do a little bit of refereeing too, just to make sure that the child is safe. But there are resources for that as well.
That's good. I know with a lot of kids, I thought about this as you were saying, right? The kids are kind of like just sick and shut in a way where they quiet their voice to protect the feelings of the mother and the father. Because if the child does go a certain way, one parent may feel a certain way, right? So in order to protect the feelings of mom or dad, the kid just decides to like keep everything in, and then you went on into the depression, which I hope you would and you did. So that's like, I don't think, this is, I'm happy that this is happening. Like, I'm jumping up and down inside, but I don't think that adults have clear enough conversations when it comes to like just having fun. Like most times babies aren't planned, right? But even if you're having fun, communicate, because that's one of the things that we touched on earlier about adults not really knowing how to communicate with things with the kid. But how about we communicate before a kid is even possibly in the mix? Could that, like stop some of the things from happening if a kid was to come into the world from these two individuals, and that positive communication or effective communication happened prior? I'm sure that would create a better situation, even if the parents didn't work out, right?
It would, but unfortunately, in the Black community, we do have a lot of children that are born out of wedlock. There's really no playbook or no script on what you're supposed to do in these situations.
Do we know why that is, Dr. Cruz? I'm just curious. Do we know why that is?
Some of it's this is what I've seen, and remember, I'm a social scientist, so we're pulling back and we're looking at some of the consequences of what has happened all of these years, just with people in general, trauma and social problems and all these kinds of things, and to a lesser extent, just the non-committal standpoint, just not being able to necessarily commit to a relationship or a family or an arrangement, or you just going through your life with believing things will get better, and this may be a marriage at some point, but actually just not getting to that point. Very deep, very difficult to do. Single parenting is not easy, not for a man or a woman. But to your point about having children out of wedlock, it is extremely difficult, because not only, and think about just the generalizing the fact that it's hard enough to raise children. Society has given us all these assignments about roles and responsibilities, and then we add some social problems on top of that, and then in an instant, anything could happen.
Yeah.
And if the relationship was strong and resilient, did have enough strength to stand, and stand long enough for a child to be born and raised in there. So it's difficult to really put an assignment with all of that.
So again, right, like with family structure and everything, you mentioned that a lot of blacks not being really like being non-committal. Why do you think so many black and brown folks aren't committed to like a relationship or what have you? Why do you think that is, seeing what you've seen over the years?
because they're unsure what it takes to be committed.
It takes work.
It does take work, but when you say it takes work, but we're talking about your whole lifetime. Ooh. And I haven't really done anything for an extended period of time, and I don't know all that it takes. I know right now everything is great, but I'm just going to say this for the record: if you have trauma, there will be a struggle, a psychological struggle between the past and the future. So even if you're in this moment, you're processing this moment and it looks good, but if you want to step out and do something further into the future, that might not be in your capacity at the moment.
I'm about to take my shoe off.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's difficult.
Yeah. And it's so unfortunate. Like I grew up with both parents at home, and so I don't know. Like, that wasn't my experience. I don't know what that feels like. But when they say, to be kind to people, and like, you don't know what people are going through, you don't know where they're coming from. That's so true, right? Because it's a lot of the issues that we have today, like you say, it did not start today. There's a deeper issue there. You got to get to the root of it, but you got to want to get to the root of it too.
That's right.
And when we talk about therapy, Doc, in Black families, like, I'm so happy to hear you say that, you have this, this healthy group of people that are coming. It's you're seeing Black people and his families referring family members. But on a larger scale, and historically speaking, we know that therapy and these type of services have been taboo, right? So, like, how do you get beyond that? And I mean, on our podcast, we've talked about, what was the episode about? Just pray about it, baby.
Yeah, just pray about it.
Yeah,
Pray it away. Yeah.
Yes.
And I feel like it should be a combination of both. I'm going to pray about it, but, baby, I'm going to call Dr. Cruz or somebody, like, listen.
Yeah.
Correct. Talk about that.
So I see that. So we have to work through that. Even if one family member or somebody's referred or they make it in the door, sometimes it's an uphill climb. They have to be convinced that first of all, they have to be convinced that they have a secret that nobody else knows, and it never got out. Nobody knows anything. And I typically share with them that you probably don't have to say anything, because we the way you're behaving, some of the defense mechanisms you're using, anger, anxiety, some of the other chronic health conditions, we know you're dealing with something potentially on a psychosocial level. Yeah. So they do have to be convinced this is new. I don't want to lead you to believe that, families have been coming in the door for all the years. No. So it started. We have family members referring family members, saying I can go there. I can trust them with my information. I can trust them to have some sort of privacy and privilege with my information and keep it confidential. But we do still have to work through. We don't tell nobody our problems. That's a cultural thing. Yeah. The spirit of secrecy.
We talked about that.
And that's how family of exploration needs to work.
Wow.
People out here in a little bit in Mississippi, they call it generational curses. But that's what kept the curse going, was this incredible silence and loyalty, which we have in our community, and it really matters. But at the end of the day, they want to find somebody that they know, like, and trust. So when we're there, I'm there. They'll see me. They'll see my family, and we invite them in and give them some time to build rapport. I don't expect anybody to come in the first day and tell me everything. Yeah. But it does work well when we give them some time and just listen. Really. Listen, talk about as much as you want to talk about, and we'll begin to unpack. Meet them where they are. The other part is what's really important is if somebody comes in and they do begin to share and establish rapport, I need to be sure that when they go back out into community that they're preparing their environment Because if you getting this help and you're getting healthy and you go back to where you came from, your work might go, it might be for nothing. And even if you start feeling better,
Wow.
because sometimes just telling somebody once makes you feel better. But
Wow.
yeah, we prepare.
Environment, making the choice, doing the work, changing your environment to keep all these things going.
Keep it going.
Oh,
Absolutely.
It's a marathon. One final question, right? We talked about trauma quite a bit, about commitment, and a few other things. What does an ideal or what does a healthy family structure look like
That's a good question, Karen.
to you in your profession?
Very well. So what we consider everybody that's there, everybody matters, everybody's valuable, a safe place where people can be peaceful. They have a sense of belonging. And so when you have a sense of belonging, you're able to use your voice, and feel like you're loved, or at least you're cared for, and you have your basic needs met. But you do have a sense of stability, and I have people I can count on here, and just really that idea of feeling safe and a sense of belonging.
I like that.
So, and then family dynamics, we talked about that, and I knew that was the final question, but the dynamic could be whatever. Family is where you
Totally.
find all those things.
Yeah.
So we hope it to be a mother, a father, and siblings, and a grandmother, and all that. But structures have changed over time.
For sure.
Sure.
That's fair.
Well, Dr. Cruz, the work that you do is so valuable.
It's very valuable.
And I just hope that this conversation is encouraging somebody today, to gather your family or gather yourself. Sometimes we just got to start with ourselves, right?
Okay.
And a lot of times people see that and then they want some of that too,
For
right?
sure.
So one last time, let us know the name of your practice, where you're located, and if people want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Oh, great. So we are the River Wellness, LLC is 245 Catherine Drive, Suite D. The phone number is 888-402-0840 or www.theriverwellness.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Cruz, I have enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
You have great energy. I could literally talk more and more, but we're going to respect the time. Really enjoyed you.
Thank you so much.
Anything else you got, Ash?
It's a wrap.
It's
Stay
a wrap. Look, man, it's Key Marcane coming to you all the way live. Your favorite country cousin, your favorite Mississippian, and your best friend with the beautiful and beautifully talented
Ashley FG here with Dr. Cruz,
Cruz.
our special guest.
And you just tapped into what?
Another episode of
The Family Tree Podcast. See y'all on the next trip. Peace and blessings, love and respect.
Until next time.